Alicia y Daniel, Nya Isma Tehuantepec Comitancio Zapotec. Welcome. My name is Juan. I am the son of Alicia and Daniel. My mom is from the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, Comitancio of the Zapotec people. And welcome to the Indigenous Ways of Knowing and COVID Recovery with Nature's Healing Power webinar. Today's webinar focuses on the health and well-being of Indigenous communities, for we have always been rooted with nature and there is no separation. It is found inside of us in what we eat, what we share with loved ones, in our medicine. Now more than ever, we can learn from the Indigenous ways of knowing and nature's healing power as a means of COVID-19 recovery. So my name is Juan Martinez. I am the Senior Fellow at the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions and Director of Fresh Tracks. My co-moderator today is Kathy Jordan, Dr. Kathy Jordan, Consulting Research Director at the Children in Nature Network. Today we will hear from our guests as they share their connection to nature, nourishment, and the care for the land and traditional lessons of resilience. I am excited about this panel of friends and personal role models, because if you have ever thought about the best concert lineup that you can imagine in your dream, this is pretty much my version of that, because each and every single one of the panelists joining us today is a rock star in their own right. That lineup is Kimberly Pikok from the Iñupiaq tribe, a Fresh Tracks leader, wildlife technician, college intern at North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management, Trenton Casillas Bakebird of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, Fresh Tracks leaders and Fresh Tracks leader and co-founder of One Mind Youth Movement. Eric Stegman of the Carry the Kettle First Nation Nakota Tribe, Executive Director at Native Americans in Philanthropy. Dr. Jerreed Ivanich of the Metlakat Indian Community of Alaska, Sishmichian. He's an assistant scientist at Johns Hopkins University for American Indian Health. Later on, you will have the opportunity to contact the presenters directly. Their contact information will be shared at the end of the webinar. And I'll turn it over to some webinar housekeeping from Kathy.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. The format of our webinar today is going to be a facilitated conversation moderated by me and Juan, talking with our guests, and then we'll open it up for questions from the participants. If you have a question that you would like to ask or a comment to make, we're going to rely on the chat function for that, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a drop-down menu where you can select to send your message to the moderator or to everyone. Our colleague TJ will be gathering your questions and fielding them to us for the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If there's a clarifying question, we might jump in and make sure that everyone is clear on that, but otherwise we'll open the webinar up to Q&A at the end. Once we begin the presentation, we'll be placing everyone on mute to ensure that we've got no background noise or feedback issues, and just wanted to make sure that you're all aware that this webinar is being recorded and it'll be made available soon for you to watch and to share with others. Juan, back to you to talk about Fresh Tracks.
Great, thank you. So this is a Fresh Tracks webinar, and what is Fresh Tracks? Fresh Tracks is dedicated to empowering young diverse leaders with cross-cultural understanding, civic engagement, and leadership development. All that we do is rooted in the healing power of nature and culture and centering youth and community solutions. We are a program of the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions at the Aspen Institute in partnership with Opportunity Youth Forum, Native Americans in Philanthropy, the Children in Nature Network, LBC Action, My Brother's Keeper, and Center for Native American Youth. The mission of Aspen Forum for Community Solutions is to support community collaboration, including collective impact that enables communities to effectively address their most pressing challenges. I want to thank our partners at the REI Co-op, the JPB Foundation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the Arthur M. Blank Foundation, Newman's Own Foundation, the Andrus Family Fund, the National Recreation Foundation, and most importantly to our network of youth and young adult leaders across the country who make Fresh Tracks a community of action and positive change. This month, we remember the 1969 Stonewall Uprising, which sparked the movement for gay rights. We acknowledge our LGBTQ and Two-Spirit Community in Pride Month this Friday, June 19th. African American communities across the country will commemorate the ending of slavery in the U.S. and celebrate the traditions passed down in Juneteenth. We celebrate and remember with you. We know there is much to do and that the path forward must be together. I acknowledge each and every single one of you for attending today, and those watching this recording, thank you, for you have already done something that is so important and can't go without recognizing. You have invested your time with us, and time is the most valuable resource. I want to thank our ancestors from whom we inherited resilience and a legacy of justice and equality, but without them, there is no us. And now is the time for action. And I invite you to join us as we power a movement of diverse youth leaders in the front lines of justice and equity. Black Lives Matter, close the camps, demand justice for our missing and murdered Indigenous women. And to all of you on your journeys, we hear you, we see you, and we stand with you. With that, let us head into our introductions, questions, and dialogue. And so this first question is for everyone on the panel today, and we'll start with Kim, then Trenton, then Jerreed, and then Eric. So please introduce yourself and share about your connection to nature and its healing powers rooted in you and your tribal community. So Kim, take it away.
Oh goodness. Hi, good morning. Ubunga Kibak Asi Tanik Siniga Kimberly Pikok. Good morning. My Inupiaq name is Kibak and my English name is Kimberly and my last name is Pikok. And I have a kind of interesting relationship with nature because when I grew up, I spent a lot of time outside with my brothers and my cousins. But in high school, I knew that I was missing out on something because I only had that time outside and I wasn't out hunting with anyone. So I had the opportunity to travel throughout the United States to learn the geology of famous land formations. And I knew something in me was missing, but when I was learning geology around me, I somehow felt connected in a different way with the outside world. And now every single time or every summer, I go out camping with my dad and my brothers. And I learned so much about myself out there because I love learning what is around me and how it got there. And I learned why the land we live on is so important. And I learned how to hunt, prepare, and cook anything we catch out there, which is super exciting because I didn't think I would make myself do that. But now I really enjoy it. And I always learn to think of elders when we go hunting. And my dad says that it's always okay to ask questions out there because I learn in a different way. And he says that nature is an open book. You just got to ask what you want to know. And in my community, nature is rooted in each and every one of us. Whether you're from a hunting family or you just go outside and play, it's rooted in every one of us because we always seek that desire to be outside. And sorry, my dog is going crazy because I'm not home at this time, but it's fine. And our lifestyle, it's built around the seasons of the year, how the snow is, how the ice is, what the tundra looks like, how much water is on the land. And I always hear people say that the outdoors and nature is our grocery store, or that we could find what we need in nature. And in my community, nature and our cultural practices brings us together as a community, and we see nature and everything it offers as a gift to us. And I love how our songs and our dances and our stories are rooted in nature and they're about nature. And oh goodness, a couple things that I'll never forget that I learned from my internship at the Inuit Circumpolar Council is that it is all connected. Speaking of nature, you cannot know what is happening within a community without knowing what is happening to the seals or the ice or the land or the water. And all the plants and all of the animals, the water, the air, the land is all of what we are. It is who we are, and it's our understanding. So that's just my little spiel of how we're connected to nature and the outdoors.
Thank you, Kim. And just for everybody's perspective, Kim is out in Barrow, Alaska. So thank you for joining with, sketchy, patchy internet servers, which the digital divide again is real. So over to Trenton.
Hamitakiapi, Chanteo, Ashtemate, Chizapilo, Trenton Cassis Begberg, Machapilo, Bombli Paha, Elwati. Hello, everybody. My name is Trenton Cassis Bakeberg. I'm from Eagle Butte, South Dakota. Calling in from the rolling plains out here. I apologize for not being able to be on video today. Technical difficulties, but just want to make sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you, Trenton.
All right. Just double checking. So I just want to thank you all for joining, and thank you, Juan, for that beautiful introduction and an acknowledgement. I'd have to say that, growing up, I was always connected to nature, being out at my grandma and Lala's house. They live out in the country, here on the reservation, and we have so much open land, so many, horses roaming around. And in the place where I come from is on the Cheyenne River Reservation. We actually have, a lot of deer, a lot of wildlife, in the natural habitat roam around everywhere. Growing up, going to ceremony, we learned that we're not separate from nature. We learned that, we may take care of the land, but we don't own it. We belong to the land that we live on. And when we stand up for our land and our rights and protect the nature, we're also protecting our people, our Oyate. And that's, kind of one of the things that I'll be talking about Standing Rock and my experience there. But I learned that, when you begin to recognize the health of the natural environment around you, then you can understand the health of the people in your communities. And, if the health isn't all that great, there's more than likely a connection to the natural environment that surrounds the communities. For example, where I live here in the Cheyenne River Reservation, our water system here, it was polluted from the uranium mining in the Black Hills about a decade and a half ago. And so, we've been living with that, and our community is substantially, living with a lot of health problems because of that, especially our elderly population. But we do what we can, and we have our ceremonies and our natural medicines to help, heal and alleviate the symptoms of, different people's ailments. But, just growing up and recognizing that, I've realized that, we really aren't separate from nature. And if we can do anything to protect the natural environment around us, then we're just doing that much more to protect the health of our people. Thank you.
Thanks, Trenton. Jerry.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Jerreed Ivanich. As mentioned earlier, I'm a member of the Matlakatla Indian community from Southeast Alaska. I'm Tsimshian. And I think my connection to nature is, a bit of the best of both worlds. I grew up most of my life in California, actually. So growing up kind of that native urban setting that, so many of us Indigenous people actually grow up experiencing. And I got the best of both worlds because I have the ability to go back, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to go back to Alaska fairly regularly for both my job and to visit family that still lives there. And so I think there's I've been placed in a unique position to be able to understand from my family, and when I go back, the importance of nature from my small community that is a fishing community, to understand the importance of taking care of the water, taking care of the land, and being good stewards of that. and really hoping for more rain, as my uncle does, as he helps run the power in the community, and they need that hydropower. So understanding that nature side, but then also being growing up on the city streets and in the Bay Area of California, and understanding that there's a unique understanding of nature through kind of a more urban city lens of understanding the need to protect the land and the sense of urgency around that when we don't have kind of un um, when you're not in Alaska, when there isn't a lot of folks there, I don't think maybe sometimes it's as urgent of a need or visible, but being in an urban setting, you really see that. And so, and then kind of my third connection that I'd just like to highlight is my ability and my profession as an academic. My work is with Native communities. I do mostly work on prevention programs with youth for suicide, substance use, and other public health concerns. And working with Native communities, they understand the power that they hold by being good stewards of the land, and I'm able to have a front row ticket to seeing that unfold oftentimes as they build those into prevention programs. And so I think in multiple facets of my life, nature's a huge impact, and the ability to learn from that and grow from that and be resilient because of it is extremely important to me and to many of us, I hope, on this call, which I think it is.
Thank Jerreed. And Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone, and morning to those of you out west. Really a pleasure to be here. Really proud of this program because of all these partners who've come together. I actually recently headed the Center for Native American Youth, who's one of the core partners with this program over at the Aspen Institute, and recently been on board here at Native Americans in Philanthropy since February. My family is from the Carry the Kettle Nakota First Nation, which is actually up in southern Saskatchewan. We're neighbors and relatives to Trenton's people. And I also didn't grow up in my community. My great grandfather ran away from a boarding school there, and our family ended up in Chicago, and part of the urban Indian experience that Jerreed was speaking to. And I actually spent most of my life growing up in Seattle. And nature's always been really an important part of my life and my entire family's life. But, I've been able to really, I think, experience that in several different ways. I've been able to go back and visit our community up in Saskatchewan and really understand a lot of the family stories and histories of that land that I learned about growing up. There's something very different when you stand in that place, when you see those native sages that have been some of our medicines for our people for many generations, and to just understand the power of place in our culture. But even in growing up in Seattle, which is the territory of the Coast Salish peoples, I spent a good part of my younger life, really paddling up and down the islands in those places and spending as much time as possible learning from our neighbors in the tribes up and down those Coast Salish waters. And for me, it's actually a pretty powerful month for me because I came out as a gay man when I was 16 and spent a lot of my younger life as a queer student organizer, and had some really tough moments and some of the adversity back in the 90s. But where I felt the most healed and the most calm were in those waters, paddling among all of our amazing friends in the animal community there. And I think as I'm seeing what's going on in our work today, especially for young people, I think that healing quality to all of our lands and the importance of being good stewards of those lands is more important than ever. So I'm really glad we're having this discussion today, and I'm so honored to be here with all of our participants, especially our young leaders at Fresh Track. So thank you for inviting me.
thank you all for those introductions and just grounding us in your elements and how you integrate nature into who you are and what has always been as well too. So thank you all for that share. A couple of questions here just to give everybody a frame of work. We're going to go through a couple of questions and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience too. So if there's some questions that again are boiling up, please feel free to go to the text box on the side of the webinar. This next question is to Kim. And the question is, how do your impact values help us understand how Indigenous ways of knowing contribute to the health of nature and the health of people? So Kim.
Thank you, Juan. This is like my favorite question ever because at a young age, we learn our Inupiaq values at school or at home in my grandparents' house. And first thing we learn is to respect everyone around us and care for our elders. And we grew up being super close to my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, even some random people across the road. And that's another Inupiaq value that we have. It's family and kinship. And a couple of other values that I would like to share is sharing respect for nature and hunting traditions. And my dad likes to take us hunt. Ooh. Oh, good. My dad, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Fine.
Oh, shoot. Cool. Okay. It shows that I was offline, but okay. Oh, what I was saying is that my dad, he really likes to take us hunting and to the cabin because these are the things he did with his parents when he was growing up. And when I was younger, and actually like the other weekend, that when my brothers and I have kids, he wants us to take them out to go and go egg gathering and just even go hang out at the cabin. And when I was younger, I didn't understand why he wanted us to do that because, like, what happens if my kids don't want to? But I realized that it's a tradition in our family that we have to keep up because if we stop now, then it won't be carried on to the future. And it's part of our culture. It's just part of our heritage that we have to go out, we have to go hunting, we have to provide for our elders because who else is going to if they're unable? And oh goodness, this is where it makes me super excited to talk about. I love talking about my grandparents and my dad, of course, but my favorite thing that we do is that whenever we go hunting, we don't really keep what we catch. We only keep like a couple of us because we're not a big family, or just my dad and my brothers and I. And we're not going to go hungry, so we're not really worried about giving too much food away. And we know what is enough for us. And my dad and my brothers, we always think of people who are not able to go camping or hunting or fishing or egg gathering. And we always bring others things that we caught because we know that they can't go out as much as we can. So that's another Inupiaq value is sharing and compassion. And another one is respect for nature. And it kind of brings this to full circle because food brings people together and it's kind of like a lifeline to community, if you want to say that. And then you have to think of where your food comes from, what the animals eat, and even the location you go hunting is important. And when you look at the value of food, there is a connection, and the connection is respecting our Inupiaq lifestyle, our heritage, our culture, land, water, animals, plants. And I also wanted to point out that we know everything is related because our land and nature is home. And if everything is fine in the natural environment for the birds, the plants, and the other animals, they'll be healthy, and so will us because we eat the healthy animals and the plants, and we will be fed and we will be full, like not just stomach full, but like spiritually full. And I just think that's really amazing how nature can do that to us. So yeah, and we know to always protect our lands and to never overharvest. And if you do catch too much, you always have to think of people and just give what you catch away. So yeah, that's my answer to that question.
Thank you, Kim. Not just stomach full, but also spiritual full. I love that. Yeah. Kathy, I'll turn it over to you for the next question.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. Trent, this is a question for you. You mentioned earlier your experience Standing Rock, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you learned from your experience at Standing Rock in terms of health of land and people.
Well, when I was up at Standing Rock, the whole thing was grounded in prayer and peaceful demonstrations. And what I learned from that is so in our Lakota way of life, in our prayer, we always end it with Mitakuye Oyasi, which in the Lakota language that means to all my relations. And that doesn't just adhere to people. It also recognizes our relation to the land, to all the animals, the bird nation, the buffalo nation, all the four-legged, all the fish, everything that is existing and is alive and depends on water, especially. So being at Standing Rock and seeing all the thousands and thousands of people that came from all different walks of life, I learned to be very humble. And kind of going back on what Kimberly was talking about with her NUPAC values, we also have similar Lakota values in our way of life. And one of them is Wa'ohula, which is, to have respect for each other, have respect for our elders, and especially for the land. And another one is Wa'hwala, which is humility, just to know that you're not better than anyone else, or you're not above the creatures of the world. You're not bigger than the land around you, and we can't have ownership. But the main thing that I learned up at Standing Rock was to have compassion for not only the people there supporting, the movement of No DAPL, but also to have compassion for the police officers who were arresting us, and for, the people who are just trying to make it in this life. And even the pipeline workers too. I learned that they're not bad in heart. They've just kind of been deceived, from the system of capitalism that we live in, and they've been misled to believe that, building these oil pipelines doesn't, harm the natural environment around them when it does. Sorry, there's a loud truck driving by, but I think that, to have compassion for not only the land but the people, even the ones who are standing against what you believe in, is one of the main things that I got out of Standing Rock. And the word for the Lakota value of compassion is wa'unshila. And I guess kind of what brought that out from my experience in Standing Rock is that I was arrested on October 27th of 2016. And, the manner in which I was arrested was really traumatizing because I was in one of our ceremonies called the Anipi, the Sweat Lodge ceremony. And the militarized police force and the National Guard had surrounded our camp. And while we were in the ceremony, they tore down the Sweat Lodge and, arrested us out of there. And I went to jail in my underwear. And it was just really, really traumatizing. And the reason I talk about compassion is because I carried that trauma for a long time. And I also harbored a lot of animosity towards, law enforcement and the National Guard. And I wouldn't want to say hatred, but I just, I carried those ill feelings towards those people for a while after that. And I started to feel sick, not just in the body, but in the mind. And, through that sickness, trying to find ways to cope, I stumbled through all the different ways, between alcohol and, some substance abuse. And I learned that I needed to heal myself. And the only way I could do that is through having compassion. And, that started from within. And eventually I realized that I had to have compassion for those who had harmed me as well. And regardless of how it turned out, they built the pipeline. It's operating right now as we speak. I still, I don't harbor any bad feelings anymore for the people who did that to us and did that to our land. And yeah, I guess that's the main thing that I got out of Standing Rock, was to learn how to live with a compassionate mindset and just try to understand where people come from, even when they don't understand where they come from, which is the land. We all are of this earth, and we're all made from this earth. That's something that our ancestors have always taught us. And I'd just like to share that with you all. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Trenton. That's amazing, and really important lessons, timely right now. So thank you for sharing that. My next question is for Jerreed. You talked about your background in public health, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the public health implications of Indigenous ways of life. Getting off mute. Okay. We can't hear you.
So maybe while Eric
yeah.
gets in here, we'll go over to Eric. And Eric, this question, I think going back to some of the conversations that we've had, how can people learn from Indigenous understanding of nature's healing power and how nature contributes to the COVID-19 recovery? I think your organization, Native Americans in Philanthropy, has done some powerful and amazing work already. And how does that come across in the resilience of Indigenous communities? So.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and Trenton, it's so good to hear from you again. Always powerful to be in a space with you, and same to you, Kim. I've known both of you for a couple of years now, and I'm always so honored to be back in a space with you. So Native Americans in Philanthropy were the largest national organization working to increase funding to tribal communities and organizations. And we've had a pretty important role in really helping educate and coordinate with funders who are wanting to support tribal communities, especially given what's been going on with the significant challenges around COVID. And I'm sure Jerreed will be able to speak to some of that a little bit more clearly. But one of the things that I think I've really been seeing are a couple of incredibly important connections to land. I brought a lot of my personal commitment to our young leaders into our work at NAP, and will always continue to. I think that centering voices like Kim's and Trenton's is absolutely crucial if we're going to build a better world. We've seen a pretty big breakdown in a number of systems over the last several months. And I think everyone's wanting to know where we need to go. And I think our young leaders have been telling us what we need to do, and that's built on generations of wisdom. So I think first and foremost, it's important that we center young people in all of this work. The other thing that, I think I've really been seeing when it comes to the specific role of nature is that, this is a really traumatic period for everyone when you're looking at especially what's happening with families, our elders, our young people, parents. I think, everyone out there has some understanding of it, but specifically in tribal communities, we've had some of the hardest hit communities by the COVID crisis. And I think nature has actually become a particularly important part of our healing process, even more than it was before, just because of what everyone's going through. One big area that's been really, I think, crucial is for those of you who follow a lot of Native stuff online. I've been really moved by this social distance powwow movement that's really blown up online. A lot of what that is just Native people going out and really creating a virtual powwow space to share their dance, to share their culture. But a lot of them have been out in their lands, talking about their lands, talking about the history of their lands and the important role that those lands have, both in their culture, but in that very necessary healing that everyone needs to go through as their communities grapple with some of this. So I think that mental health role, a lot of what I'm sure Jerreed will speak to, has been really critical. And then the last part I'll say is I think that a lot of other Americans who don't understand our communities very well are understanding the complete failure of the modern American food system. And as we've worked with a lot of our community partners across the country, I think what we've been advocating for a long time around movements like food sovereignty and reclaiming indigenous food systems is really starting to come to the forefront for Americans who are starting to see what these supply chains are doing and the need to really get back to our land, the animals on our land. You've just heard from Kim speaking to, what they're able to do to feed their people, to feed their relatives and their neighbors. And we are advocating to get back to that kind of system. And that is, a central part of, where nature heals us. And I think she spoke beautifully to it. So there's a couple of these big areas, I think, that we're going to continue to help other community members focus on. And we're here to really just continue to connect with those voices and those communities for anyone who wants to invest in our communities as we really center nature, food systems, and the resilient power of nature in our recovery process moving out of this COVID.
Thank you, Eric. Powerful, powerful work. And I think we might have Jerreed back here. So Jerreed, mic check, 1, 2.
So Jerreed, to just reiterate that question, I was asking you about the implications of public health, the implications for public health of indigenous ways of life. We still can't hear you. No. He's going to call in. Okay, he's going to call in. While he's doing that, we just want to encourage you to use the chat box to put in any resources that you would like to share with each other about building community, helping other tribal communities connect to nature, anything about connecting to nature during the time of COVID. We'll be capturing that chat and happy to share out those resources. So, Juan, what do you think? Should we go to a question from the audience while we see if we can get Jerreed back?
Let's go ahead and do that, get some questions rolling, and then we'll interject when Jerreed is able to join us. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a question here, hopefully you can all see that on the screen, that says, how can I begin conversations about my own learning from Indigenous mentors to people with little or no context of those values in Western thinking? For example, capitalist land ownership versus the sacred nature and non-commercial, that's a big word, non-commercializability of land in the ways of thinking of Anishinaabe nations. Who'd like to answer that? Wondering about Eric or Trenton.
I'm happy to jump in. I think I know it's oh, sorry, there's some feedback. You hear that? Okay. Yeah, I think there's a number of national organizations that have tools and resources. We're certainly one of them when it comes to really helping people shift their foundational understanding from a Western worldview to one that's grounded in indigenous values. One resource that we offer is something called Investing in Native Communities. If you Google Investing in Native Communities, you'll see a separate platform that has a lot of sort of 101 and introductory resources on tribal communities and our history, authored by Native people themselves. And so that's a really good resource to help people at least get some of the basics and start having conversations around the bigger picture. When it comes to, Anishinaabe people that you're working with, it's just very important to make sure that they're leading that process and that that's their voice and that they're entering that conversation in a way that's appropriate and respectful and meaningful to them. So I think, there's no better way to help Native or to help non-Native people understand where Native people come from than to invite Native people from any of our nations and cultures into the room to be able to share their story and begin those conversations themselves. And it also helps people really understand the deep diversity of our people. So I think those are kind of the two ways I would approach that. And I'm happy if you want to reach out for to help introduce you to any other, sort of broader resources to help with those conversations too.
Thanks so much. Jerreed, do you want to say something? Let's see if we do a little audio test here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay. All right, well, I really appreciate it. I'm so sorry about all the technical difficulties on my end, but I don't know if we want to finish up this question and go back to the other question, or if you just want to move forward with this question. And what's your preference? Sorry.
Would you have an
Let's
answer?
go with the original question. Yeah.
What was that? Sorry, my audio, I couldn't hear you.
Let's just go with
Says, go ahead.
to you.
Yeah,
I can go with the original question I asked you about public health.
Yeah. So again, so sorry about the confusion and the issues on my end. So I think from a public health perspective, as folks were talking and going through things, I just started to write down some notes of folks, other academics that I know. Often, many of them, actually, I'm looking over the list. Almost all of them, Indigenous scholars. Not just doing research in Indigenous communities and with Indigenous communities, but Indigenous themselves. And, so I was writing down just exemplar cases of individuals returning to nature. So I was thinking about Dr. Karina Walters from the University of Washington and the work she's doing. She takes folks back on the Trail of Tears and walks that land again to really reconnect, not just to nature in its contemporary form, but also kind of rooted in the history of separation, of removal, and the trauma that is associated with that, and connecting people back not only to the nature but to their stories and to their ancestors. And I think that that's really powerful. I'm just going to rattle off a few here, but Stacy Rasmus is the director of CANR, which is the Center for Alaska Native Health Research in Fairbanks, Alaska, and her team, folks like Jim Allen and so many others, are doing work around suicide prevention in rural Native communities. And part of those prevention programs are often about getting kids out there foraging, harvesting, hunting, and really getting them back connected, and how that actually has a benefit truly in terms of life and death when it comes to high rates of suicide mortality. I think that's an amazing example. Just to name off a couple, Valerie Jernigan in Oklahoma, who's doing work, as Eric mentioned, about the importance of food sovereignty and people now recognizing what they can learn about food chain systems and what they're putting into their body. She's doing amazing work around how to collaborate with communities to incorporate traditional food back into traditional communities so that way all can have access to it. I think that's an amazing connection to culture. I work at the Center for American Indian Health at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, and we work with tribal partners in the Southwest, White Mountain Apache, Navajo, and many others. But our founder, Dr. Matu Santosham, started his work as a medical doctor in the community for several years and helped develop what we now know as Pedialyte, which has saved millions of lives. But that lesson and that foundation was founded in White Mountain Apache, with those people and with their feedback of what was going on. So that effort alone has saved millions of lives, literally all over the world, with oral rehydration efforts. Not only is he an amazing all-star on that front, but 4 of the 7 vaccines that all children are required to get in the United States, 4 of those 7 trials were conducted by Matu Santosham and his team, again, in these Southwest tribal communities, and were clinically proven to be effective. And work continues to go on. And I think oftentimes we think of research in a kind of what's going on in this bigger system, and how can we then apply it to Native communities, and how can we adapt it for them. But there's a host of work. This is just to name a few, but there's a host of work being done and being led, culturally grounded work, voices heard from communities, that has the ability to actually impact upward and outward to the globe. And that's really exciting to me, because I think, as we've been mentioning, nature has this ability to teach us lessons, and who better to learn about those lessons from those that have stewardship over the land for generations and throughout all time. I think that they can really tell us something. And so nature's I think of it as a vehicle to teach us. So thinking about these prevention programs, thinking about the efforts that are going on, oftentimes, what is the mechanism for reduced suicide or for improved food sovereignty, or whatever the outcome of interest, lowering depression, mental health, whatever it may be. I think that there's some type of therapeutic aspect of being in nature, but oftentimes what it is about nature is being in nature allows you, to Kim's point earlier, is that it's an open book and you have to ask questions. And so when you go out and you go hunting, it's not just the act of physically walking around, finding a place to fish or to hunt, or to harvest. It's not just that physical activity, but it's the life lessons that are taught from our elders downward, that really give you the life skills needed to be resilient. And so, and that's one thing I love about being in public health, is we see those lessons not just being told to us that they're happening, but we're empirically measuring that. And so when our communities are in need, we have data to back up and support their claims for programs and for efforts moving forward, that returning back to traditional ways can improve environmental health, food sovereignty, mental health, physical health. And that's a beautiful thing. And that can speak to global health for everybody. And that's really exciting for me.
Thanks so much. I'm so glad we got you back on audio.
Me too. Thank you.
Juan, you want to take the next question?
Yeah, and so our next question is up on the screen, as you can see there. Would you be able to speak to how, as mental health practitioners or not, we can respectfully incorporate this wisdom into nature therapy in a way that amplifies this wisdom and provides therapy, and at the same time spreads awareness of Indigenous people? Who wants to take that one? Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really that's a heavy question, because there's a lot there to unpack. And so I don't think that I necessarily have all the answers, and I don't want to put words in my collaborators and my colleagues' mouth, but I don't know if we'll be able to fully answer that. But I do think that communities hold wisdom. And I think that there are examples of communities really empowering their individuals in those communities to seek out kind of non-traditional, non-Western approaches to healing. And so one of the examples that I'm thinking of is just, Navajo Nation is doing a lot of work right now to make sure that there's a traditional medicine man available at many, if not all, of the larger hospitals on the reservation. And so, in addition to the Western traditional, that's what that's the terminology they often use of medicine and approach to healing, but they also have supplemental care through traditional medicine men, and they have a hogan on site that individuals are able to visit and to engage in some of those cultural activities. And I think that that's just one example that they've been able to not only incorporate it kind of as just a side project, but it's now being built into what's being covered in the healthcare, and they're able to get that those medicine men reimbursements and the respect that they deserve for the healing that they provide to community members. But I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to continue to move forward in terms of blending those two approaches moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Jerreed. The other thing that I would offer is that a lot of us on this panel are part of the environments of belonging work at the Annie Casey Foundation that they're leading with Dr. John Powell's pioneering, work there as well too, and a lot of that really centers on understanding where culture and communities of belonging and othering start to really impact the youth and young adult well-being indicators that we're all tracking in our own communities. And I think one of the most powerful pieces of that is that you don't always have to, there's this romanticized vision of like indigenous communities and I need to know everything about other communities to validate my own culture. And I think sometimes my response to that is to just say, look into your own culture and your own traditions and your own legacy and start to bring that into your own work that you're doing. You don't necessarily have to always look to others to really look within and to scale within of your own roots and culture that you're seeing. And so while there is this sense of this Venn diagram of being able to share with each other the knowledge that has been passed by our ancestors and in our communities, oftentimes we start to look elsewhere instead of looking inward. And I think a lot of us, regardless of where you come from, there's a culture there, even if it's not generations old and you've been disconnected and disenfranchised from it. There's a culture in your own family units, in your own community units, everything from hanging out on Friday night to watch a movie to these traditions that can start anew, and you can create your own traditions sometimes as well too. So that would be my response to that.
CJ, do we have any other questions from the audience?
Can I just add a little bit more to what Juan was saying?
Sure.
As you were talking, something really came to my mind, and I remember. So I heard this story from someone else who kind of heard what this story kind of a thing, but I thought it was an impactful lesson. But there was this a tribal medicine man that walks into a hospital, and the doctor asks what's wrong, doesn't say anything. He asks again, hey, if you don't talk to me, I can't help you. And so the medicine man turns to him and says, well, do you dance? And at that point, the doctor realizes oh, well, he's seeking to get health and care through traditional measures. And so he's like, no, I don't know how to dance. Can you teach me? And his response was, I can teach you the dance, but you have to hear the music. And I think to your point there, we can kind of learn dance steps of tradition and of culture in whatever setting that we're in. But I think what we're really after is let's hear that music. Let's hear what is there, the true meaning behind it, to improve health for others around us. And so and that's going to look different if you're in Alaska, or if you're in South Dakota, or if you're in the Southwest, or if you're in Sacramento, California, right? That's going to look different. But I think what what we shouldn't always just be focused on are those dance steps. What are the dance steps of the culture or the tradition that will get us to checking off a box? But what's the spirit behind that, of actually moving forward with a unified relational approach to healing? And I think if we hear that music, it will move us in some way. If that's not too overly cheesy, I'm usually not that guy as an academic, but I think
I think you connected it perfect to my concert lineup in the beginning, right? So you're good. I think that's perfect. So looking at time here, I do apologize. I see questions here, and we will do our best to try to facilitate those questions as they're getting there. Maybe as a follow-up, Research Digest newsletter. If you haven't seen that, you'll hear about it here soon. But before that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to close us out with some basic housekeeping, and then we'll do one roundabout and ask each of our panelists to leave us with your call to action as we close out the webinar. So, Kathy, take it away on contact info and communications.
Sure. Thanks, Juan, and thanks to all the speakers. We're going to put a slide up now that has contact information for our speakers in case you would like to connect with any of them afterwards. As we noted before, we have recorded this. We will disseminate that. We are also capturing information that is offered in the chats and can disseminate that as well. Also wanted to note that by registering for this webinar, you have essentially signed up for CNN communications, including the Research Digest, which Juan has mentioned a couple of times, as well as other announcements and communications from CNN. And you can opt out of those or unsubscribe at any time if that's not what you want to receive. Juan, I think you had some announcements and some opportunities around Fresh Tracks you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so we are coming up on some this is one of many webinars that will be coming up. Some of them will be hosted with Children in Nature Network. Some of them will be hosted at the Aspen Institute and the Center for Native American Youth and Native Americans and Philanthropy. So encourage you all to stay in touch. Follow us on Twitter. You'll find the latest information there as well too, and links as well to our website and to sign up for those updates. So one of many here that we'll be doing it with Fresh Tracks. And with that, I'll turn it over to our esteemed panelists here, and I'll go backwards from our last roundabout. So I'll start with Eric, Jerreed, Trenton, and then Kim will have the last word here. But before that, just thank you all for joining us on this special moment in time, and we look forward to working with you to change the world for a better place. So Eric, take it away.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet and go back to what I said earlier. We're in a moment of really important change, and our young people are the ones demanding that, and we need to listen to them, and we need to center them in all of our work. You've learned from some great young leaders here who are really centering nature in their work, and I think there's a lot of us as organizations who are able to help point you to those great young leaders across the country. Fresh Tracks is one of them, and how to do that. So let's listen to our young people, and I think we're in a really important moment to really restructure all of this stuff.
Thanks, Eric. Jerreed.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It's been a wonderful time to hear and learn from everybody on this panel, and to see such amazing questions from the group. Feel free again to reach out to me. I'm more than open to continuing this dialogue in whatever form it needs to take place. But I think the call to action for me is about engagement. I think if that's being engaged in your local nature, great. If that means being engaged in a local cause, as we've heard folks on this call that are engaged in local causes, if that's being engaged in research or partnerships on programs for youth, I think there's a way for all of us to stay engaged, and I don't think that there's one that's necessarily better than another, but you find your strength, find what you do and connect. And I think that is something that Indigenous communities have and will continue to teach us is the importance of these connections. And as we do that, we'll all be better for it. And so I appreciate everybody on this call listening in, joining, and I look forward to more conversations like this in the future.
Thank you. Trenton, checking to see if you're still with us. I know you were in the middle.
Yep.
There.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Great. Take it away,
Can
Trenton.
you guys hear me okay? Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Awesome. So once again, I just want to say a big thank you, to all the organizers who invited me to be here, and especially to the listeners for joining the webinar. It means a lot, and we all come from different walks of life, but we all share a common thing, and that's the land and nature that we live in. I guess, my call to action would just be to recognize and acknowledge the land that we're on, and, think back to the old days. This at one time, this is all indigenous lands, and we know that the medicines that we need to stay healthy, and to grow, they all come from the earth. And especially, when the cure for the COVID-19 pandemic comes out, that comes from the land as well. So think about that. And also just to recognize what extraordinary times we're living in. I mean, this is like nothing we've ever seen. And being a young person, at the front lines of some of these things, like right now, I'm working as Border Patrol on my reservation, to kind of keep the coronavirus out of our homelands and protect our vulnerable population, because we have such limited medical resources. But being a young person in this extraordinary time, I just ask you to recognize that this is the time for change. And, there's changes coming every day, good and bad. And we just need to stay prepared and stay focused and, get more aware, raise awareness in your communities, about issues that are, Indigenous peoples are facing, and not just Indigenous peoples, people of color across the nation. And yeah, just stand up for what you believe in, and remember that we're all people of the land. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trenton. And Kim, close us out, please.
Oh dear. I just wanted to say thank you to all of the people that's listening. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, everyone, for facilitating this webinar. And I also just wanted to apologize for my connectivity. It's kind of really bright outside, so there's sunspots, and then I kind of lose connection because it's so bright outside. It's really weird. And I'm also by the ocean, and my dog's kind of crazy. I'm so sorry, but my call to action is to just show respect, acknowledge what's around you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to just sit outside and observe what's around you, because that's how you learn. And make sure you always say thank you to your elders. Always ask them questions. Just talk to them, because they have so much to say and they want to say it, because they just like talking to everyone. And oh dear. And I wanted to also mention something that I read on a food security report that I found on the Inuit Circumpolar Council. And this quote, it means a lot to me. It's, without whales, where would we be? We would be nothing without the seals. We would be nothing without fish. We are nothing. So just find connection to nature, find what is important to you. It's like the plants. You are something because these animals have a connection to you. The land formations, you are connected to them and they are connected to you. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. That was perfect. With that, thank you for your time, everyone, and stay in touch.
Thanks, Juan and Kathy, for keeping us on track.
Thanks, everyone.